More specifically, we're going to be talking about what I've decided to call the 3 E's. It's aimed particularly at teachers of English at a primary level, although many of the points are applicable to all ages. And we will be especially aiming the session at people who are working perhaps with large classes, starting to work with new and perhaps unfamiliar material. And I'll be referencing through the session the course that I and Lily have been working on and promoting for quite a while now, which is the Picaro course for pre-primary and primary children. And I'll be sharing with you bits and pieces of material just to illustrate the points I'm making. The points I'm making are independent really of Picaro and can be generalizable to all materials, all types of classes of children learners. So let's just take a quick overview of what we're going to do and start to look at our key points. So the first E is engagement. We'll be talking about how to achieve this engagement, to get the children captivated. One of the things we'll be looking at, or two of the things we'll be looking at, will be the importance of instilling routines and how we can signal clearly to children what is needed when. That way you can make sure that the children are all fully involved with the class. Next, after that, we'll be looking at enjoyment, obviously, an absolute key factor. There's nothing truer in the classroom than the fact that children will learn more effectively if they enjoy what they're doing. So, variety and managing children's energy are really key points in this, and we'll be talking about how to build in this variety and make sure it's appropriate for channeling children's energy during a normal class. And then finally, we'll be looking at what actually constitutes effective learning. How does it come about? What happens inside the child's head which makes their learning effective? And we'll be looking at some key factors that we can always and easily include to make this happen, including the positive aspects and the good feeling, if you like, in the class, the way that we can build in multi-sensory activities, and I'll be explaining that a little bit later, and giving the children processing time to make sure that everything is filed away efficiently. So that's a quick overview of what we're going to be doing. We'll also be talking about giving overviews later in this session and then helping children get an overview of what's coming next, but that's coming later. For the first few moments, let's look at the question of routines. So as it says at the top of the screen there, I hope you can all see, we all have routines. Humans, and in fact many animals, but perhaps especially humans, are creatures of routine. We work on a day-to-day basis around a set of routines that we've established usually over many years. Everyone has them. It's not always easy to recognize them, but there's a couple of situations maybe where we can just delve and start to recognize. Think about your daily routines in these two situations. Here's the first little chance to talk to the person next to you if you have someone next to you. If you don't have someone next to you, just take a moment to reflect on this and think about what your routines are. What are the things that you do in the same order every morning, every evening? There may be slight variations, but variations are easier to make once you already have a set routine. So there's a quick discussion topic. I'm going to ask you to either think about it on your own or quickly talk to the person next to you about your morning and bedtime routines and try and see how many things you have in common with the person next to you. That'll be 30, 45 seconds, and we'll come back and round up. There's your first topic. Just a few more seconds to finish off the chat with the person next to you or your own personal reflections. Okay, a request to repeat the question. The question is basically what's on the screen there. asking people to talk to the person next to them, or if you're on your own, just have a quick reflect about what your morning and bedtime routines are. What are the things that you do every day in the same way? For example, when you first get up in the morning, what's the first piece of clothing that you reach for? What's the first thing that you eat? Is it always in the same order? When do you get dressed? When do you eat? When do you wash? What's the order of your morning routines? And the same sort of thing when you get to the end of the day for the bedtime routines. Just to have a think about it. So, don't want to take too much time on this. I'll come back and I'll quickly walk you through my morning routine. My morning routine is something, obviously, that I don't even have to think about, and that's the point of routines. The first person to get out of bed in the morning is, in fact, my wife. She gets up and she goes to have her shower. A little bit later, I get up, I put on my dressing gown, I go downstairs, I make breakfast for myself and my wife and our daughter. After that, I usually check my Facebook, and then I have my own shower, I get dressed, and I start work. It's a broad routine with many little bits and pieces in between, but it's something that I have to do, that I do without even having to think about it. And I think we all have these same things. That's the great thing about routines. Routines are fairly complex tasks about getting yourself ready for an entire day of work without even really having to think about it. And that's why routines are important for the classroom, because they're quick, they're efficient, and they get things moving without having to take up brain space or consideration or thinking time. They happen automatically. Routines happen for us as adults in our day-to-day lives, and they're important and they anchor what we do every day. But routines for children are especially important, especially when, imagine, the child is coming into a completely new situation. They're coming into a foreign language classroom where they'll be encountering things they've never come across before, new language, new phrases, new teachers, new colleagues very often. And to have these routines to be able to anchor what they're doing on a day-to-day basis removes anxiety. It makes procedures quicker, and it frees up the brain space to be able to think about higher things, about learning, about acquiring new language, etc., which, if we don't have the routines, some of that brain space gets taken up by thinking, what am I supposed to be doing now? What's coming next? If the child already knows what's coming next and how to react and where to go and what to do on a routine, automatic basis, then we've made more processing brain space available. So, routines are very important to help the child move into that new environment and free up their mind for the purpose of learning. It's interesting when you talk to children about their school, and you ask, and I have asked many children, what do they like least about school? And surprisingly, it's not the tests or the homework or even the teachers. It's actually the time when they are sitting doing nothing. Children hate being idle. Those moments when they finish an activity and they know that they did it much faster than their colleagues and there's going to be nothing else to do for several minutes, when they're waiting for the lesson to start, but first the teacher has to take the register for 30 children before anything can happen, when one child is writing on the board and the others know that means that they have nothing to do for the next few minutes, they'll be sitting idle. Children react against these idle moments, and we've all seen the way that they can react, which is by getting restless and noisy sometimes. So, number one routine perhaps should be that we make sure that there is always something for children to do as soon as they come into class. There's always a positive feeling when they come in. There's always a positive activity for them to take part in, and something which will both have their attention and start to activate their English and get them engaged. So the first thing we can do is make the register into one of their routines. And the register can be something which is very uninteractive. Teacher calls name, child says hello, yes, present, something along those lines. But we can make that register the first encounter with English in every lesson by using the register to recap vocabulary. As the teacher calls every child's name, the child will answer with an item of vocabulary from the topic that we're covering. It may be colors, it may be numbers, it may be animals, it may be clothes, it may be any range of vocabulary that you've been studying recently. Every child hears their name, every child answers with an item. All the other children remain involved because they're counting what's the most popular item, how many repeats did you hear, were there any items that we didn't include. So everyone listening has a task as well, and that's something that can happen at the beginning of every lesson. The children know that they'll be engaged, that they'll be having something active to do, but also very achievable, and they're not going to be idle waiting for their own turn because they're also going to be listening and counting or waiting to find the most repeated item. Everyone involved. So something like that, where the children know as soon as they come in, there's going to be something that keeps them active. And the register is something that very often has to happen, so let's make it an interactive moment. I'd like to show you here an activity which is described in the beginning of the teacher's book in the Picaro course. In books 1 to 4, there are a selection of teachers' books 1 to 4, a selection of activities suggested for opening the class and for ending the class, a warmer and a cooler, if you like. And one of the activities is called Save Draco. Now, Draco is one of the characters in Picaro. He's a friendly little dragon, and we'll see him in a moment. And let me just quickly show you the game. The game is very quickly and easily done on the board like this, with just a couple of pens and a couple of pictures. We start off with a line at the top, and these lines, which you can see now coming down, are in fact ropes which are holding up our favorite little dragon. There's Draco. He's the friendly little dragon in Picaro. And he's being suspended from these safety ropes. At the bottom of the screen, we have a wavy line, which is the water, and waiting in the water, we put a crocodile. So there's Draco in a bit of a precarious situation. Now, this is a great opportunity. It's very quick to set up. To draw those lines takes you 20 seconds. To put the pictures and have everything ready is a very, very quick way to set up a revision activity. And what you do next is show the children a series of flashcards. The Picaro flashcards cover all the vocabulary that you need, and the children call out the name of the item they can see on the flashcard. A quick, easy way to remember. If they take too long or if they get an item wrong, that's when the ropes will start to disappear, and poor little Draco is being held up by fewer and fewer ropes. With every wrong or slow answer, it's a slightly suspenseful situation. It's quite exciting for the little children to see these ropes disappear, and the final question might go wrong and the last rope disappears, which may be slightly worrying for some children, but of course we have to remember, you may be able to see here that Draco is a dragon. He actually has wings, so there's no need to worry. Draco can actually just fly away, and the crocodile will go home hungry. So something like that, which is very, very quick and easy to set up at the beginning. The opportunity for recapping is very important. Bringing back that language is an absolutely essential part of effective learning, and we'll talk about that later. And it's very easily done in a couple of minutes and provides an enjoyable, engaging way into language for the children at the very beginning of the lesson. Occupied right from the word go. Just to mention that there are other activities, as I mentioned, in the teacher's books 1 to 4 of the Picaro course. There are games to play, there are songs, and there are chants to get people engaged and involved and active in the class at the very beginning. There's a little song which I'd like to share with you now. I once watched a lesson where a teacher of little children, they were 5 and 6 years old, did the whole lesson with every routine signaled by a little song. It was one of the most wonderful lessons I'd seen. She had these great little songs for everything the children had to do, including getting their books ready, including standing up and coming to the board, including moving to a different part of the classroom to do a circle time when they were sitting on the floor. Everything had a little song, and the children joined in and sang each and every little song. I've never done it as extreme as that, but I do like little songs and chants to get people focused, attentive, and moving on to the next activity. And one that I used to do for books, getting the children into the habit of getting their books ready at the appropriate moment. I don't want their books on the desks all the time. It's too much clutter. Things fall off, pencils fall off the edge of the desk. So we had a little routine which signaled when the books should come out of their bags. And it was a little song that goes like this. I will sing it for you. I've had a little bit of a flu recently, and I've got a cough, so I hope I don't, excuse me, I hope I don't spoil the song by coughing in the middle. But my little song for the books goes like this. I've changed it slightly because it's Picaro, so the song now goes like this. It goes, Picaro books, me and you and you and you. Picaro books, students' book and workbook too. Picaro books, are you ready? And by the time we finish the song, and the children after a while will be joining in and singing along, the idea is that by the time we finish the song, the children will have the books on their desks, they're sitting waiting with their arms folded, and they're absolutely ready to move on to the next stage. Little songs like that are great. The children won't learn them instantly, and in fact there's not much point in teaching the song to the children, but if you repeat it over and over again, the children will start joining in and singing the song, and it becomes part of their routine. It's something which obviously has a feel-good factor, and they enjoy not only the fact that they can join in and sing, but the fact that they feel safe, they know what to do, they know they're doing the right thing, and they get the approbation of the teacher at the end. You always thank your children for doing so well and so quickly. And there's a charming comment from Elinara, thank you. Elnara, nice singing. Not in my best voice at the moment, but you see how easy it is to make these little songs and chants. If you don't like singing, you can do it as a chant. Just go, Picaro books, me and you and you and you, Picaro books. And it can all be done as a little rap, if you like, a little rap in the classroom. A chant or a song gets people attentive, moving, and knowing exactly what to do next. If you want some more ideas for chants and songs, there are some, as I say, in the teacher's books for Picaro, but there are many, many, many more online. If you go to Google or any search engine and you put in a search saying songs, chants, classroom routines, they're the keywords, you will get pages and pages and pages of example songs and chants that you can adapt to your classroom. And it's also a great way to see all the different stages where routines are useful and necessary, and start thinking about how you can build them into your classes. So, there we go. Instant activity, getting children engaged, using songs to catch their attention, to move them on, to make them feel good, to know, and for them to feel confident exactly where they are. Now, I, by mistake, showed you some pictures just now a little too early, and I'm going to show you them again now. And we have another quick discussion question for you, if you're ready for that. Here's a selection of items and objects and actions. The discussion question for you now, or the thinking question, if you're actually on your own attending this webinar, is to talk to the person next to you or think on your own about what all of these things have in common in terms of the classroom. I will be revealing the answer in just a moment, in 30 seconds or so, but have a quick talk to the person next to you and see if you can decide what they all have in common in terms of classroom activity. There we go. I'll come back to you in just a moment. Okay. The answer, which you may or may not have reached in discussion with the person next to you or in your own wanderings on your own, is that all of these items are things which I personally have either used or had seen used to get students' attention. They're attention-getting devices, if you like, and I think that's the popular phrase. And some of them are effective and some of them not so much. That's the next quick question. Another 30 seconds. Have a talk to the person next to you or think about it yourself. Which of these ways of getting the attention of all the children in the class do you think are effective and a good idea to use, or on the other hand, not effective and not a good idea to use? Another quick 30 seconds and I'll give you my views on which of these work best. Yes, as Lily has just pointed out, thank you, Lily. Please feel free to type your suggested answers into the chat box as you're thinking about this as well. Very good point. Thank you, Lily. Okay. There's a little time to have thought about it to get some ideas together. And I'll quickly talk through with you now my views on each of these as a possible way to get whole class attention. The first one, the tambourine. I actually saw this used just recently. I was in a conference in Chile, in South America. And there was a session delivered by an incredibly talented woman who you may know called Carol Reed. She's an author of many very successful books for young children. And she was delivering a talk to a group of 300 or more teachers in a big auditorium. And of course, she gave people things to talk about and discuss with the person next to them in small groups. And when you get 300 people talking, obviously that's quite a lot of noise. And she at times needed to bring back attention, and all she did was rattle her tambourine very gently next to her microphone, which was on her dress. But if you're in a classroom, you don't need a microphone. And the gentle sound of the tambourine alerted people to the fact the speaker needed their attention, and very quietly people very quickly people quietly stopped talking and turned their attention back to Carol, and she thanked everyone and moved on. It's a nice, gentle way to get people's attention, and it works an absolute treat. The egg timer in the middle, the kitchen timer, let's say, is something that I have actually used myself. I had one of these in my classroom years ago, and the children quite liked it, especially when I would say, okay, we've got 5 minutes to do this activity, and they would see me set the timer for 5 minutes, and they would know that that was their time. There would be a bell ringing at the end of it, and at that moment was obviously the cut-off point, and they had to stop and bring their attention back. It was a bit of fun. It was a little bit exciting, maybe. It was the sort of thing that there was always one or two children in the class who would jump in surprise and give a little scream. And so it wasn't a very calm way to do it, but it was effective, and it was quite fun to signal a specific amount of time and when it ended. The scraping the nails down the board, that's something obviously which is a nightmare for many people. I must admit I have done it only as a joke. The students complained loudly, but they were laughing as well. It's a horrible noise and it does get people's attention, but I really can't recommend it unless you want to frighten your students. Probably not a good idea. I've seen people also, I've never done it myself, turn the lights on and off very quickly, or off and on, depending what time of day it is, a couple of times in quick succession. I can't say I like it. It's certainly effective. The students will look up immediately and say, what on earth is happening? But I don't like that panic moment where it's going to too aggressively grab people's attention rather than gently asking for it. So I don't recommend the lights on and off. Apart from anything else, it could even be dangerous for possible epileptic students in the classroom, and we have to be careful about things like that. It's also bad for the light bulb. Waving. Now, here's something I learned, again, from another conference speaker. Years and years ago, I watched he was famous at the time, Mario Rinvolucri, one of the key names in ELT, about 20 years ago at least. And he had a technique when giving seminars in conferences where he would let people know at the beginning when he wanted to get people's attention, he wasn't going to say anything or make any noise. He was just going to stand at the front and wave. And as people noticed him waving, he asked them to wave back until everyone was waving, smile on their face, completely silent, all waving, and he knew that he had everyone's attention. And I do it in conferences now. Whenever I go to conferences, I always use the raise a hand and wave to get the attention of a large group of people. It always works, it always makes people smile, and it does work with children as well. They obviously enjoy smiling and waving back at you, and there comes a point where you can see very clearly you've got everyone's attention and you can move on effectively knowing the children are all with you. I like waving. It's very gentle, it's very cooperative, and it's a quiet way to do it. And finally, obviously, the last one with the poor teacher shouting and trying to get the attention of the students. We've all been there, haven't we? So much noise in the class. What are we going to do? We have to make even more noise to get the children's attention. Obviously, this is not a good idea. If your intention is to lower the noise in the classroom in order to get the children's attention to be able to move on to something new, giving answers, giving feedback, introducing a new activity, then increasing the noise by shouting is not really going to fulfill your objective. So shouting is really not the way to go. The more you do it, the more immune children get to it. It also gives a very bad model for how they then have and that they can pick up and use to get attention. We don't want children moving into that habit either, so let's instill good habits in the children and use something which is gentle and cooperative. Have an experiment. If you don't already have one particular one in place, experiment. Choose one, try it out, see if it works, see if it feels good with you, see if the children respond well to it. Remember, these things don't work immediately and fully effectively on the first time. They need a little time to get, for the children to get used to them. That's the same with all routines. It needs a little bit of perseverance, and after a few lessons you can normally see, okay, this is working for me or it isn't working for me, but do give it some time. It's an incredibly useful thing to have in your repertoire to be able to bring everyone together and get them ready to move on, preferably with a smile on their face. And you can thank them for their cooperation. We all know that too much praise is not a good thing, but thanking children for doing something and cooperating is always appropriate. That's nice. So yeah, we need these sort of signals in order for the lesson to run smoothly. We'll need to get their attention and move them on to the next phase. All sorts of phases and different directions and levels of energy that we can do. Of course, we know that a good lesson is very often a lesson that makes a mix of lively and quiet activities. Children have a lot of energy and they need to get rid of it, some of it at some times. And children also respond well to relaxed moments and quiet moments where they can reflect. So we need to balance both. Let me show you now a whole selection of different activities. Here we go, on the screen now. I've labeled them stir and settle. Stir activities being those which will raise the energy level in the class, which will give the children the opportunity to move very often, to expend some of that energy which they seem to have endless sources of. And they need to expend some energy during the class, otherwise they will get too restless. So stir activities are the lively ones, and the settle activities are the ones which help them focus better, be quieter, have time for reflection, and encourage a quieter classroom. So there are, I think, 16 different activities on the screen. And There may be one, I ran through these with another teacher before coming on here, and there was one which we picked out which may need some explanation. That's a running dictation. Near the top on the right-hand side, there's an activity there that I've called running dictation. Let me just explain what happens. In a running dictation, you divide the children into pairs. So there are two children working together, divided around the whole class. For each pair of children, one child will be sitting where they are, and the other child will be running or moving to another space in the classroom where you have put either a picture or a text, or sometimes picture and text. They'll be looking at the picture or reading the text, getting information from it, taking that information back to their partner, and either describing what they've seen in their picture or reading the sentence they've memorized, and their partner will be using that information to perhaps complete another picture, to fill in the missing details, to color the picture in the correct way that matches the one the children saw on the wall, or to complete a text with missing words, depending on their level, depending on what you're working on. But a running dictation is always where there's an information gap that one child can go and get the information, bring it back, and complete for the child who's waiting there for the information. So there's something which, as you can imagine, is fairly lively. You have half the class running backwards and forth, and that will definitely be on the stir side of the division. That's the thing I'd like to ask you to think about now. Oh yeah, I've just seen a comment here that running dictations are really so much fun. All ages, it's true. I've done running dictations with little children's class. I've done running dictations with adult classes as well. Adults don't tend to run. They tend to walk in a more relaxed fashion. But the movement involved and the sharing of information is an absolute winner. It's a great activity, and I really encourage people to try it with any class you have. So, very quick question. You've had a chance now to look at all these different classroom activities. Is there anything else there that you'd like to type into the chat box? Anything that is not entirely clear that you want me to quickly explain? Just have a moment to look through the activities and see if there's anything you're not quite sure about. And I'll explain it quickly if you put it in the chat box. Okay, good. Right, in that case, once again, this is quite an involved activity, so we'll have a full minute or perhaps a little more to talk to the person next to you. Again, if there's someone with you watching this webinar alongside you, or have the time, if you're on your own, to think to yourself, how would you divide these activities into two groups, ones that stir the class and raise the energy, and those that settle the class and lower the energy and help children focus. Have a minute to think about that. By all means, please do, if you come across an activity that you're not quite sure what it means, type it into the chat box and I'll give a quick explanation. But let's have a minute to think about which of these activities are energetic and stirring activities and which of them are relaxing and settling activities. I'll come back to you in about a minute. Okay, thank you, Chris. Quick question about visualization. A visualization activity is one where you ask the children, I often ask my children to close their eyes and imagine a situation. The typical situation, the first time I ever experienced this was in a seminar with Herbert Puchter, the great Herbert Puchter, the great author of children's materials. And in this conference session, he asked us to close our eyes and imagine we were walking on a beach, and he asked us to, in our mind's eye, look around us. What could we see? What could we hear? What could we feel on the sand beneath our feet? What were the people doing around us? What animals could we see? And what sounds were they making? And a visualization is a way of building this very complete little world inside your head, guiding questions from the teacher, hopefully inviting them to see and imagine things which they can name and explain in English. And then when they come back from the visualization, you often have some quiet music playing to help them focus and concentrate and imagine. Then there's the time they share with their partner and they tell each other what they saw, what they heard, what they could do, what they could see, what they could smell. And it's a lovely, quiet way of making a very richly textured world and having lots to talk about simply by closing their eyes and asking some questions. So there you go, Chris. I hope that answers your question about visualization. Again, it's one of my favorite techniques. So I think we probably had time to get this overview of, excuse me, the overview of the stir and settle activities. Let me show you my next slide, which is the way that I have divided them up into the two categories. So we have stir on the left-hand side and settle on the right-hand side, and I've put them in two columns there to show how I feel these different activities can have the effect of raising or lowering energy. Have a quick look through, see if you agree more or less with the way that I've divided them. A couple of them might be a little controversial, and I'll explain those in a moment. But first of all, have a quick look and a check, see if you agree. I'd imagine that's more or less how you divided them. But as I did say, there are a couple which are could go one way or the other, a little bit controversial. Music is one of them. I put music in settle. No, I really put that there simply to be controversial. Music, very often when we use it with our children, is something which raises the energy because we ask the children to listen to the song and sing and do the actions. And we very often get our whole class of children smiling brightly, singing their hearts out, doing actions that illustrate what the song is all about. And it's a lovely, energetic, community type feeling where everyone is enjoying doing the same thing, and that's lovely. Music is also a way, and I just mentioned it now when we were talking about visualization, is also a way of providing a calming effect in the classroom where there is some background noise which means that children are less likely to engage in extra conversation because there's already noise in the background. It's a way that if it's the right type of gentle music can help them concentrate and organize their thoughts. And so music can be used to help settle children and provide just a gentle atmosphere in the background while they're working on something quietly. The other one there that is perhaps slightly odd to be in the position I put it is drilling, which I put near the bottom of the settle column. Now, drilling obviously can, again, be very energetic. If you have a whole class of 30 children all repeating over and over again the key vocabulary, chanting the numbers, repeating them again, practicing the pronunciation. But the wonderful thing about drilling is that when you finish drilling, you have the attention of each and every child in the class. They've all been doing the same thing at the same time in lockstep, and they're all ready for you to move on. Drilling is a technique which you can use quickly and easily to make sure that or it's a quick way to get the attention of everyone in the class. It doesn't seem out of place. It always seems appropriate. You take the key vocabulary, you ask the children to repeat it, ask them to say yellow. Good. And again, yellow. Everyone, yellow. And by the time they've said it 3 times, you've got them. They're all there and they're ready to move on with you. You can also, of course, raise and lower energy while drilling by drilling louder if you want it to be more energetic, or by drilling more and more quietly and going yellow, 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 and lowering the energy of the class until everyone is whispering. And the children are not only attentive, but they're quiet and waiting to see exactly what's going to happen next. So drilling I put on the settle side. But there we go. We do need a balance of activities. Let's look at how this balance might look in a typical class. I just put here an example lesson shape. This is how a typical Picaro lesson might go, and I'll talk you through it in a moment and what they all mean. But this is perhaps, for any type of material across any type of class, fairly standard setup for a children's language class. I've color-coded it, as you can see, into 3 sections. Circle time, table time, tablet time. Circle time is when the children are, if you have space in the classroom, very often sitting on the floor in a circle. It's a sort of little community time, isn't it? They're interacting, they're working closely with the teacher. It's very often the presentation time and the first interaction time when they're playing with new language. Table time is when they move from the circle back to their desks, if you have that space in the classroom to make the distinction. Back at their desks, quieter time, downward focus, time for reflection. Table time is usually more measured, more relaxed, and more focused time. And then finally, tablet time is something which is very important in Picaro. Picaro has a large range, a huge range, 960 online games which provides the opportunity for the children to re-practice, recap, and consolidate the language they just learned. And so tablet time is an extra stage where the children can either on a tablet or on a computer have the chance to be independent, autonomous, work with the language, experiment, confirm, try again, and make those final adjustments to the language all on their own using the technological approach. So the typical lesson, I've outlined it there with the arrows going from a warmer at the beginning where they might be recapping using the Draco game perhaps, a presentation of new language, some interaction to help them see if they've got the new language and see what they can do with it. Back to the table time for the quiet practice with the books. They'll remain at their tables to play a whole class game on the interactive whiteboard. The online games can also be played on the big whiteboard with all the children calling out the answers. The online games are when they move to their tablets or possibly their individual computers and do the autonomous, independent practice with the support of the teacher. Finally, they come back to their workbooks and do some consolidation of the written form if that's appropriate. And you might finish on a song for a feel-good feeling, covering the same type of language before we say goodbye and end on a good mood. So I've done, for this typical lesson, a graph of the energy. Here's what the energy graph would look like for this lesson. Let me just talk you through it. So they come in, there's a medium energy starting from the left-hand side. And with the warmer and the presentation and the interaction, that's going to raise their energy. There's going to be lots of attention, lots of interaction, repeating and playing with the language. Energy rises. Then as they go into the practice with the books, generally the downward focus when they're back at their tables is a quieter time and the energy graph and the curve goes down. It will start to come back up for the whole class game because that's generally a lively time when children are calling out answers. And then it will come gently back down again when they're practicing their online games. It very often seems to people that 30 children all in a class playing online games would be noisy. It's not. It's a very focused, quiet time, and every child is really individually very committed to what they're doing on their tablet. And it tends to be a very concentrated time in the class. The workbooks, again, will be a gentle time in the class to do that written consolidation, and then the energy will rise again at the end with a little song to bring up the feel-good factor before they say goodbye and leave the class we're on a rise of energy, feeling in a good mood. And that, although there are many ways to achieve it, that's the type of energy graph we're looking for. We need something which is going to provide a mix of activities, which is going to keep the children occupied and engaged. It's going to give them a chance to release the energy and a chance to reflect quietly. And there should be a few ups and downs within your 45-minute or 60-minute class. And if you can do that, it's working well. I'd just like to invite you quickly to consider a lesson that you've done recently. I've just been reminded that I'm running a little short of time, so I'm not going to ask you to do this now, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Go away after the session and play around with this. Think of a lesson that you had recently, last week, possibly, that went particularly well, or possibly, which is maybe even more useful to investigate, one that didn't go as well as you wanted and you weren't quite satisfied with. And think about how energy was regulated and controlled and guided in this lesson. What different types of activity did you have? What effect did that have on the children's energy levels? And what sort of graph do you end up with of energy levels over the course of that class? It can either help you see why that lesson worked so well, or it may help you see why that particular lesson, which didn't go so well, perhaps maybe had a little bit of an imbalance in terms of up and down energy. There's a little task for you to carry on after we finish the session. I actually need to move on, and I'm going to come to a little activity which I must do with you before we round up. This is an activity, again, which I saw in a conference just recently and I absolutely loved. And it's very, very typical of the way that we can encourage effective learning. So, a quick explanation, and I'm going to ask everyone to stand up and join in. I'm already standing up. I'm one of these people who is always energetic, which is, I was one of those annoying children in class who can never sit still. Anyway, so I'm going to ask you to join in physically in a moment, but let's just quickly explain. Physical spelling is when, as usual, you might ask the class to spell out a word, but as well as spelling the word, the children are doing a gesture for each letter. All the letters, like the ones you can see on the screen here, that have a stalk that goes up from the middle of the line up. When you say one of these letters, you put your hands up in the air. So for B and D and H and K, L, T and S, which all go up from the middle of the line, you raise your hands. For letters that don't go anywhere, they just sit in the middle, the ones that have no up or down stalks, for these ones, arms are crossed, indicating the middle line, and for letters which have a down stalk going down below the line, then you put your arms down by your sides. So if you're ready, I really wish I could see everyone joining in, but unfortunately I can't, so I'm just going to have to trust that you're doing it with me. We're just going to practice spelling out in a physical way a few words. Remember, letters with the stalk going up, raise your arms. Letters in the middle, fold your arms. Letters with the stalk going down, cross your arms. And here's our first word. On the count of three, we'll all do it together. Call out the letters, raise, fold, or lower your arms accordingly. And here we go. 1, 2, 3. D, O, G. Easy, yeah? Did you all get it right? Raised arms for D, folded arms for O, arms down by your sides for G. A nice simple example. Let's move on. Here's one which is a little more complicated, a little longer, a little more attention needed. Again, we'll do it on the count of three. Please join in. Physical spelling, raise, cross, or lower your arms on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. E, L, E, P, H, A, N, T. Yay! We're obviously extremely good at this because we know how to spell these words. We don't have much thinking to do, but for children who are encountering these words early on in their learning, it's a great challenge. It's a fun challenge. You're absolutely guaranteed to get all the children laughing, smiling, fully active, and thinking very carefully about what they're doing. That thinking is really important. People remember what they think about, and that's one of the tenets of effective learning. Here's another one, very quickly. This is our last example. We're all going to do hippopotamus. Are you ready? On the count of 3, once again, you have to remain focused for this one. It's a long word. Are you ready? It's going to go 1, 2, 3. Hippotamus. The ending is very simple. A whole series of 4 letters to have your arms crossed, but lots of ups and downs in the middle. Fun for me. I'm enjoying it. Fun for me, fun for you, I hope. Incredible fun for the children. I've just seen a comment from Larissa saying, yes, they will be very excited. You're absolutely right, Larissa. It's guaranteed to have the children engaged and having fun. Now, this is an example of something which is incredibly important, and people are becoming more and more aware of this. The value of multi-sensory input. Anything that we do in class, if we can involve as many senses as possible when we're presenting or practicing language, it makes it more effective to get the language into the child's brain and easier for the child to remember and recall it afterwards. I read this fantastic book. I put the title there for you. I highly recommend it. Brain Rules is a wonderful investigation of the brain, and especially in key chapters. It's not just about teaching, but in key chapters, it really does talk about how learning works and how we can help children learn well. And this is one of the ways. Combine senses. So if you have a visual, make sure the children hear as well. Hearing and seeing is more effective than just hearing or just seeing. If you put text as well, it makes it more effective again. Visual and hearing plus text is more effective, it seems obvious, doesn't it, than just hearing and visual on its own. And if you can combine movement as well and get the kinesthetic physical activity going as well, it makes it even more effective. Studies have been done on this showing that not only is it more effective, it's exponentially more effective. Adding these senses together makes it the percentage is more effective than if you just added the percentages of each individual sense. Together, they're bigger and stronger and more effective. It's, as John Medina said in his book, multi-sensory activities, and they're easy to build into children's activities, are the way to go. It'll get in there better, it'll stay for longer, and it'll be easier to recall if you put multi-senses on top of it. Something to try and build into all types of activities. I'm just going to skip forward here and talk very quickly about one of the activities that happens on a regular basis in the Picaro lessons. We talked about online activities and online games. Here is an example of an online game. I'll just describe it very quickly. You can see this is a still screenshot of the game in action. It's for children beginning their English, learning the first classroom vocabulary. And the online game involves seeing the word at the top of the screen, hearing the word said by the narrator, looking and finding the correct picture that matches to the word, moving the hammer and smashing the ball to show that you've chosen the right picture. Now that's a wonderful multi-sensory activity. It involves the text, it involves hearing, it involves seeing, it involves identifying, it involves moving and using the hammer. Not much movement, you might say, just a couple of mouse movements, a couple of clicks, but for the children playing this game, they're not thinking about the mouse and clicking. If you ask them, how did you play that game? They will say, I heard the word, I found the picture, and I used my hammer to smash it. It's very physical in their heads, and it has the same sort of effect in the child's head as real physical movement does. And this is an example of the way that we can bring all these senses and sensations together and make language not only fun, but memorable in terms of cognitive the overall cognitive effect and the effective learning that happens. Multi-sensory activity is definitely the way to go. So I'm just going to have a couple of minutes now. I know I'm right on time. Just to round up, there's just a couple of bits left to go back and mention again. Always important in every lesson to have that chance to recap and go back and bring back the materials. Let's do it quickly. We talked about routines. We talked about helping the children feel comfortable in the classroom and know where they're going to go so they're fully engaged, they're not worrying, and they've got brain space free to move on. We can use songs, we can use chants, we need those attention devices. Children like to be active, as we've already said. Use a variety of activities. Picaro, the course, has lots of different activities built in, including these wonderful online games. And you can use your knowledge of whether the activities you choose are going to raise or lower the children's energy to make a nice, productive energy curve, which will give them high moments and low moments, time to have fun and time to reflect within every class. And finally, let me just recap this and say, if you want your children to learn effectively, then go for the multisensory approach. Try and build in something which has visuals and audio and movement to have the best possible effect. If they can see it, if they can hear it, if they can move and be able to repeat it, repetition is also incredibly important in effective learning, then they will learn more effectively. The great thing about online games is that children will happily repeat them over and over again. You don't need to ask them, they do it automatically. So I'm going to leave you with a few challenges now. Here's my possible suggestions for the next time you venture into your children's classroom. We talked about making the register interactive. Let's get that going. Use it to practice some vocabulary, to revise the material from the previous lesson. I really recommend that you try out the physical spelling, whatever the age of your students. It's going to be fun. A lesson menu is something, unfortunately, I had to just quickly skip over. But we can come back to it another time. And finally, getting multisensory activities into your classroom. So I'm just going to end showing you the Picaro World website, where you can go for more information. There's information for teachers, information for parents. You can sign up for a free trial and play with the activities. And for my part, that's just about the end. I'm sorry I ran over a couple of minutes, but now there's an opportunity for questions. I didn't notice many questions as we were going along, but there's one. Thank you, Larissa, for your question. The range of age for Picaro. Picaro is designed to start from as young as 3 years old. At 3 years old, they will be just about able to manipulate the online material, use the mouse to do basic things, and of course, there is a range of brightly colored and engaging print materials. So Picaro goes from 3 years old all the way up to the end of primary. And the aim is that they reach the end of primary and they have a pre-intermediate A2 level and are fully prepared to take the Cambridge exams, the Cambridge Young Learners exams, starters, movers, and flyers as they move through the course. So they can start from 3 and go all the way through to 10, and it covers all the Cambridge Young Learners exams. There's a question from Chris about multisensory approach applying to adult learning. Absolutely, Chris. The first studies that were done on multisensory learning, there's a guy called Richard Mayer, who's an educational psychologist working in Harvard, I think he was. Oh, I might have that wrong. Anyway, he was named as Educational Psychologist of the Decade in the 1990s because of his work with multimedia and multisensory learning. And he experimented. All his studies were done with adults. The results were very clear and very interesting. He did experiments in the 1990s, which he then came back and tested the people 20 years later and found that those that had multi-sensory input as opposed to those that had single sensory input remembered things better 20 years later. It's a long-lasting, very effective technique. Works with children, works with adults, works with, well, that's pretty much everyone, isn't it? But there you go. It can go across the board. Any any further questions? Let me just scan. I don't think we have any more coming through. Last chance to type a quick question into the chat box. Okay, no, it looks like we're done. Thank you very much, everyone. My apologies for running just over. I've run over, and in fact, Lily has had to leave us. Apologies, Lily. But I will just recap by saying what I know Lily was going to come on and say, which is that you will all be receiving a follow-up mail after the end of this webinar, thanking you for your attendance. And there will also be a link in the mail which will allow you to download a version of the slides that we looked at in this session. That thing about repetition, that thing about recapping and coming back and looking at the material again is your opportunity to do the same thing. Please take the opportunity to find the link, download the slides, look at them again, and test yourself. Can you remember and explain what we talked about in the session? Explaining to yourself is another really valuable technique. There's your opportunity. You'll be able to have a look at that on your own, in your own time. I'm going to end now. Thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. Please feel free to contact me via Picaro. Let me just show you my email address, which is info@picaroworld.com, and I wish I'd remembered to put this in the final slide, but there we go. You can all contact me at info@picaroworld.com if you need any further information, further clarification, or further ideas. I'd be delighted to hear from you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye now.